The Lost Generation. The Lost Generation is a generation of people who were born before and during the First World War, according to some sources, around 1883 or 1890. This generation is characterized by the fact that many of its representatives were unable to adapt to a peaceful life after the war. Remark also characterizes this lost generation. They are tough, decisive people who recognize only concrete help and are ironic with women. The lost generation faced challenges similar to those that the current younger generation faces: a pandemic, a difficult economic situation, and significant socio-cultural changes. The Great Generation. The Great Generation is a collective name given to the generation that was brought up during the Great Depression and then participated in the battles of World War II or worked on the home front. The term was proposed by Tom Brokaw in 1998 as the title of his book. In the book, he wrote that it is the greatest generation ever produced by society. According to Brokaw, none of the men and women of this generation fought for fame and recognition. They fought precisely for the right cause. It is not surprising that the Great Generation is also known as the generation of World War II. Not only did the war affect the life of this generation, but also technological development, mass distribution of radio, movies, cars, and the development of popular culture and the entertainment industry, including cinema, literature, fine arts, and music. The active life of this generation accounts for the so-called Golden Age of Hollywood. The Silent Generation. The Silent Generation is the generation of people born from approximately 1928 to 1945. It is also called the Quiet Generation. Their parents faced terrible trials, the greatest global economic crisis in history, and the most destructive large-scale war. Perhaps, therefore, coming of age in the 1950s, they became leaders of the civil rights movement and also formed the silent majority and created the rock and roll music of the 1950s and 1960s. The most amazing fact about the younger generation is its silence. With rare exceptions, it is far from being up to the podium in comparison with the fiery youth of their fathers and mothers. Today's young generation is a quiet little flame. In the USSR, the silent generation was represented in the 1960s. The silent generation never rose in a single impulse as a sign of protest. The silent generation was heterogeneous, and although it relied on the silent majority, it at the same time gave birth to representatives of the beat generation, hipsters, bikers, and other subcultures. The growing up of baby boomers. The growing up of baby boomers was influenced by socioeconomic conditions such as the economic recovery after the Second World War, the Cold War, witnessing the launch of the first satellite of the Earth, and the landing of man on the moon. The values of the baby boomers are based on the so-called psychology of the winners. This generation includes people born from 1944 to 1964. During their lives, a consumer society was established. Objects and equipment that previously could only be afforded by the elite became commonplace in every home. Refrigerators, televisions, washing machines, telephones, and much more. It was a time of optimism, economic prosperity, and a growing middle class. In the culture of the boomers, there is a contradictory mark. On one hand, it was a generation of traditional family values that married early and had many children. On the other hand, they actively participated in protests, created protest subcultures, fought for women's rights and against discrimination of various groups, played and listened to rock, created a significant anti-war movement, organized a sexual revolution, and radically changed culture throughout the world. The boomer generation tends to feel at the height of history, and since they lived in a world where life was constantly getting better, it is very difficult for them to understand modern youth, who are faced with numerous manifestations of stagnation and rollback in various areas of material and spiritual life of modern society. Generation X. Generation X is a term applied to the generation of people born around 1965 to 1980. Generation X is usually called the generation of people born during the period of decline in the birth rate that came after the population explosion. Various influences shaped the Generation X: dissatisfaction with the authorities, lack of trust in management, huge political indifference, an increase in the number of divorces, an increase in the number of women mothers in the workforce, reduction in funding for the education system, inaccessibility of student loans, environmental problems, the creation of the internet, and the end of the Cold War. Generation X, at the very height of their social life, found themselves in a situation where technology began to change many times before their eyes, causing an explosion of social transformation. This generation knows life outside the era of the internet. They can compare and understand the advantages and disadvantages of information technologies and the pace of their changes. Never again in history will there be such a generation. Generation Y. Generation Y, also called millennials, is the generation of people born from approximately 1981 to 1996. They met the new millennium at a young age. They are characterized primarily by their deep involvement in digital technologies. They are called the first truly global generation because they have been included in the global information network, the internet, since childhood. They are also called the unlucky generation, or the Peter Pan generation, due to the fact that its representatives tend to delay the transition to adulthood for a longer period than previous generations and also stay longer in their parents' home. The root cause of this trend can be attributed to economic conditions, the international financial crisis, widespread increase in housing costs, and unemployment. Self-expression is extremely important for this generation. For example, in China, with a population of over 1 billion people, the desire to stand out from the crowd and be individual has become the cornerstone of Chinese youth culture. In countries around the world, it is only thanks to internet access that people assert themselves in online role-playing games of the MMORPG genre and virtual worlds like World of Warcraft and Second Life. The most expressive representatives of Generation Y have earned recognition by organizing online communities, starting internet memes, or collecting flash mobs. Other, more socially shy people have found themselves in anonymous online communication, allowing them to be more liberated. This generation does not easily adapt to hierarchical structures and bureaucratic decision-making methods. They expect professional development of their skills and do not want to stay in the same position for a long time. Generation Z, or Zoomers, is the term used for the generation of people born from approximately 1997 to 2012. Some believe that they began to be born from 2000 to 2006, but it is impossible to accurately determine the boundaries of the generation until its representatives reach adulthood. Representatives of Generation Z actively use tablets and smartphones. The internet is no longer limited to the home computer and can be accessed almost anywhere and at any time. Often, the term Generation Z is considered a synonym for the term digital person. Zoomers are credited with such characteristics as an interest in art, economy, and sustainable development. They are considered very sensitive and hardworking. Such people are predominantly homebodies. The values and traits of Generation Z are being formed right now and are not something established. How exactly do they differ from millennials? Zoomers have undoubtedly been significantly influenced by the global pandemic, disrupting the development of their socialization skills. Generation Alpha is a term used for the generation of people born approximately from the mid-2010s to mid-2020s. During the birth of the Alpha generation, many countries around the world observed a decrease in the birth rate. In the entertainment sector in childhood, smart technologies, social networks, and streaming services increasingly dominate, while interest in traditional television decreases. Changes in the use of technology in classrooms and other areas of life have influenced how this generation experienced early learning compared to previous generations. Research shows that allergies, obesity, and health problems related to screen time have become increasingly common among children in recent years. Alphas will be the largest generation in history. By 2025, there will be more than 2 billion alphas, with most coming from China, India, and Indonesia.